From New York, we're joined by Kevin Sanders, political analyst and director of special projects, War and Peace Foundation. Kevin, I'd like to have you catch up with a conversation on this nuclear deal between Washington and New Delhi and the obstacles it's facing at this point.
Well, I think we should welcome any obstacles at all that can be put up. It is a terrible idea, an awful idea from the beginning, and I hope it will not go through. And in fact, I suspect that it probably will not. I'm immensely encouraged to hear that some of the other countries involved in the nuclear suppliers have very serious reservations and are trying to stop this. It's interesting to note which countries are doing this. Countries like, not the big countries, not the big nuclear powers, but countries like New Zealand and Canada and Norway, which, by the way, is probably the most enlightened country in the world. They're against this idea, and they're not likely to back down. They're not likely to give them the consensus that they need for it to go through. These countries are taking a very sensible view that this is surely not the way to achieve world law regarding nuclear materials and nuclear weapons. The Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty was designed specifically to stop this, and now America is saying to India, in effect, forget about the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. We'll find some way around it. We're ready to ignore it. Throw it away.
Let's take a look at Reuters' article, India Won't Accept Conditions on U.S. Nuclear Deal Report. Diplomats said conditions tabled at the NSC included intrusive UN inspections of Indian civilian nuclear sites, cancellation of any waiver if India tests bombs again, and periodic reviews of Indian compliance with the exception. But India says, no conditions. I want a clean deal without conditions.
Yes, I think it's absolutely outrageous, but India is going to try to get away with whatever they can get away with. They're going to push as far as they can. They can see how desperate America is for this deal to go through, because it is starting to seem now quite possible, a bitter irony for the Americans, particularly because this was their idea in the beginning. They pushed the idea of this deal, and now they find themselves in a position where it may just be possible that the American Senate or Congress will stop this from going through. That it may create a situation in which other nations will then come in and sell the deal, follow up on the deal, and make whatever sales are now being promised by America, make whatever such sales to India, and probably without any kind of restrictions either. So one way, it is the end result is bad, because it's going to encourage India to go ahead with its nuclear weapons program, and that is bad, full stop. But the only hopeful sign here is that it does show that there is a growing world resentment about this, and it is being expressed most thoughtfully and effectively by these smaller nations. Well, countries like Norway particularly are doing wonderful things to help get rid of the whole nuclear problems at every level. They have banned all investments in their pension funds of companies that make nuclear bombs, and they've named them big companies: BAE, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, Honeywell, Finmeccanica, Safran. There may be more. They no longer invest in them. Norway's also building nuclear reactors that run on thorium rather than uranium. Thorium is not appropriate for making bombs, and it doesn't have the very long-term wastes that uranium and plutonium have. And existing reactors could be converted to thorium. So there are ways around this problem, and it would be a very good thing if these countries, New Zealand too, New Zealand has just finished an international conference called by Helen Clark, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, calling on the parliamentarians of the world to unite, to call on their governments to stop the flow of materials for nuclear weapons around the world, and to strengthen the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which America is now recommending be virtually abandoned in the case of India. Australia, which now has a very green supportive government in place, is also now calling an international conference to find ways to bring about the implementation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. These are the countries that I think will stop this deal going through. And if so, if this is done at the level of the nuclear supply group, then that means that this will come to an end. If the nuclear supply group does agree to allow this to happen, caving in the way the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, has, expectedly because the IAEA is really just a public relations arm of the nuclear industry, so it's not a surprise that they did that. But if the nuclear supply group can stop the chain, stop the flow to India, then I think we can rescue this situation.
Kevin, I'd like to have your take here on the double standard. Israel, of course, an entrenched double standard as far as U.S. Policy is concerned in terms of the nuclear weapons, let's say, not even nuclear technology. And, well, of course, on the other hand, we have Iran in the story of NPT, and now another vivid example of this double standard, that being India. Kevin?
Oh, yes, the whole thing reeks of hypocrisy and has from the beginning. And more credit then to people like Jimmy Carter, who recently asserted that Israel does, in fact, have, he said, an estimated 120 nuclear weapons. That, by the way, is in contrast to Daniel Ellsberg, who a couple of years ago said that he thought it was probably closer to 400. But the fact is that it is in the hundreds that is alarming. It is even more alarming that it's sort of a figure that slops around between 1 or 2 or 3 or 400. That itself is also alarming. And of course the absurd hypocrisy of the fact that the country that has not signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty has this huge arsenal is an incentive, a threat to all of its neighbors who will then, and some of them are, looking at the possibility of getting nuclear weapons. Therefore, what I think this whole situation may bubble up to is to remind us of the urgency of bringing about a real resolution of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty globally with everybody involved. And again, the need for a genuine IAEA inspection system that can observe the entire nuclear fuel chain without interruption. I mean, at the moment, the United States is saying to India, well, we want to inspect, but we're not going to inspect the bombs that you have, or the places where you make the bombs, or where you store the bombs. We're not even asking you to tell us where the bombs are. You just do what you want with your bombs. This is in complete violation to the whole spirit of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and is a major threat to the continuing operation of the treaty in any sort of way.